All right, we are on the air with Jeremy Osborne.
Hello.
And I am Maggie Rasco.
And I am Jillian Flexner.
This is the Fresh Squeezed Opera podcast. So, Jeremy is a baritone, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so Jeremy, can you tell us about you as a singer? And maybe you can start with the fact that you're in France right now, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I came to France because I think the conservatory training in the United States tends to focus more on diction than actually knowing the language, which I think is very, very problematic. If you look back at the many of the old school singers, they spoke the languages fluently that they sang it primarily. And I wanted to, I know Italian is probably the most useful, but I also wanted to learn French. And French and Italian are very similar, and then eventually get around learning German also. So I'm studying at the University of Nice. It's just a French performance. That was the garbage truck outside.
Cool.
A French garbage truck. Hey, they're not on strike.
Right? So yeah, I came up here because I wanted to try, because I wanted to be fluent in a language, so if I was singing a French opera, I'd get closer to the meaning of the words and not have to spend so much time on how do you say this and what does this word mean. And I think that's a real hindrance, particularly for American singers, because most of the standard rep operas are not in English; they're all in French or Italian. So.
Yeah,
that's a great point. That's a really, really great point. And I think that sort of your point about Italian being maybe more useful. I think that's an interesting phrase because it's only useful if you're singing in Italian, but a lot of, if you live in a country where opera is being made, hopefully it's in the native language of that country. So hence, if you're in America and there's more American opera being done and you can perform that, then you get to sing in your mother tongue, which is the best of both worlds. So it's
what's
great that you're learning
interesting
French.
Is when I was in Austria, I went to see Prokofiev's Love for Three Oranges, but it was Ein Liebe für drei Orangen. So it was in German in Austria, even though it was a Russian opera.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's another interesting point also. There was a period, actually, one of my voice teachers at Peabody said that when he was singing at New York City Opera, they would do things like Mozart operas in English, because there was a period before super titles and Met titles on the back of the seats, like at the Met, where people were trying to perform operas in the local language so that people could understand it more that way. People who really think that is one of the big things that puts people off from opera is that, well, if it's in English, then, people would be more interested. But I don't think that's totally accurate, because I think it's still very difficult sometimes to understand. Like with the Enchanted Island in English, Joyce Donato, I think, has some of the best diction in the business. And you can get maybe 75% of the words from her. Has a very good technique and clear diction. But it's hard to get words across running around singing and unamplified, I think.
Yeah. Do you follow Joyce Donato online at all? I've watched a lot of her video blogs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really great.
Jeremy loves Joyce Donato.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I think what she's doing to sort of it's like outreach, but it's also she answers questions that young singers have. I think she's a fantastic resource. It's really great what she's doing.
Absolutely, and of course a fantastic artist too. She sings very, very well. I also really like the fact that she is not unwilling to speak out about things that she doesn't like. She spoke out against the law in Russia, the homosexual propaganda law, and apparently there was an article in which she said that she turned down a gig in Russia in a couple of years because she said she couldn't sing in a country that is homosexual. Okay. Very few artists, I think, are willing to take a kind of political stance. Everybody's kind of wants to say, like, anodyne and not offend anyone. And I really appreciate the fact that while she's extremely likable, she's not unwilling to take stances that are unpopular. And, of course, so willing to give back by way of blog and by way of her. She has excellent master classes and is not organizing in them at all. She's very, very honest about the things that were very hard for her and how long it took her to get going. So I think she is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I'm such a fan. I love her. Yeah. Jillian, you want to ask the next question?
Oh, sure. So what is your favorite aspect of singing and singing opera in particular?
My favorite aspect of singing opera is the excitement of experiencing a live, unamplified voice. The feeling that you get when someone stands on a stage hundreds and hundreds of feet away from you and lets rip with a sound that is not enhanced in any way by technology. It's just an acoustic phenomenon that when a voice is produced a certain way, it makes your ears ring. It's called the singer's formant. It's a certain frequency that when a voice is produced, ideally it produces this overtone that causes your ear to ring, which is why singers are able to carry over an orchestra. It seems like it should be impossible, but it's an acoustic phenomenon because the human ear is designed to be sensitive to the sound of the human voice. And I think there's something really, really exhilarating and exciting about hearing somebody just sort of have at it in a way that...
That's the beauty of it, really, is the live aspect. You're watching someone in the moment exert themselves in that way, and I think that's what exhilarates me about going to the opera. It's something we don't see in movies anymore, and we don't hear it in recordings anymore because it's not live. The studios are the place where you perfect all of that, so you hide all of those flaws. But when you watch a live performance,
they say that on average, if you're listening to a professional recording, they edit every
6 seconds.
Yeah, every 6 seconds.
Yeah. Every 6 seconds is a new or different take. So you're never listening to one take. It's just, Let's see. We've got more questions, but Jeremy, if you don't mind just answering a little bit, what is your sort of your past? What's the timeline for your trajectory? Where did you start? Where did you go to school? You mentioned Peabody. Tell us a little bit about that.
All right. I started studying voice with a private teacher in Arkansas, where I was born. I was born in Arkansas when I was 17 years old. And it was George Antolic. And his wife, Martha Antolic, taught voice at the University of Central Arkansas. And because I studied with him, she heard me also and suggested that I audition there, and I got a large music scholarship there. It was a local school in Arkansas, but it was actually had a pretty strong music department. It had an excellent music theory teacher, excellent music history teacher, and of course I got very well with my voice teacher. So I was there. My senior year I auditioned for grad school and ended up going to Peabody, and at Peabody I studied for a while with Stanley Cornett, and I studied for a while with John Shirleyworth. And then after I graduated, I stayed for a year in Baltimore and was actually traveling to New York to study with Stephen Smith, who taught at Juilliard until 2011. And I actually moved to New York to be closer to a more substantial operatic scene. And there for 2 years, and I will probably end up going back there because I do adore New York City and the art scene in New York City.
Well, I assumed you were coming back here, so that means that you have to.
All right, it's been decided. Jillian says you're coming back.
So, I was there and I took lessons with a former student of Steve's, Claudia Friedlander, and that's sort of been, other than that, I auditioned for a couple of things. I was involved with this little company, it was Amore Opera, I think the Count.
I've heard of them, yeah.
And then
they're great.
I write some of our opera. I write reviews for Parterre, and I comment sometimes on topics I think are very interesting in the discussions. So,
fantastic.
He's a very good writer and critic, and he's very fair.
I was going to say, and I mean this in the best way possible, but there's that adage that some people say, singers should not be asked to speak. A singer should not be asked to talk, because there's this idea that we can't express ourselves, and I think that's, in some cases, maybe it's true, and in some cases it's very wrong, and I'd say for you, Jeremy, it's not the case at all. You're very intelligent. You have a great way with words.
I think the biggest problem in music critiquing is, especially if you're a performer, or I guess only if you're a performer, is the possibility of alienating yourself from a potential, working partners.
Right.
But, Jeremy is very, very fair in his reviews,
right,
and they all make sense, and they're not, there's nothing too scathing, and there's always, like, a nicer side. It's very balanced. So, I mean, you don't have to worry about alienating yourself, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's what artists want, too. I mean, don't we want our colleagues to give us critical feedback that is also not, painful? It's like a critique in an art class. You don't, or a master class. You don't want someone to just tear you apart. You want helpful feedback that you can use.
While that's true, I have a really good story. When I was working at the Philharmonic, I was sitting in a concert. I had free tickets because we get comps. And the guy in front of us heard my boyfriend and I, Lee, talking about what was going to be played. And I don't recall. It was some Mozart, some classical music. And by classical, I mean the era of classical music, which is Mozart and Haydn.
The actual genre.
And that's not my favorite genre of music. And we were talking about it, and this guy in front of us turns around. He's like, "Oh, well, you're wrong, and you don't know what you're talking about." And I was just like, "Well, I'm looking at this from a bassoonist perspective because I play the bassoon." And he's like, "Oh, is that like a bassinet?" And it turned out this guy, he gave us a card. He was an actual classical music critic, and his name, like the name he used when he wrote, was like the conductor machine. Oh no, it was the superconductor. And this guy literally took up 2 seats. And
yeah.
you know who he is?
Yes, he's a character.
He doesn't know anything about music.
Speak your mind. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but like you said, Jillian, don't tear someone down because you may be working with them later on, and what are you going to do then?
Yeah.
So, anyways, moving right along, Jeremy, how do you approach learning opera?
You mean learning a role or learning about the art form?
Learning a role.
I would translate it first if it was not in English. And then I would go through and I would speak the words in rhythm. And then I would go through and I would learn the pitches at the piano. I can't play well enough to accompany myself. I can flunk out notes. And then I would sing through it. Like I would do it in chunks. Like I would pick a scene and be like, all right, I'm going to learn this scene. And then, I would break it down and then put it all back together. And then you add a layer on layer, and then you add the dramatic element of it, But I would first do words, rhythms, pitches, singing, dramatic intent. That's
great. That's great.
As far as learning about the art form, I think that it's interesting now. You can learn about opera on the internet,
Yeah.
I think that as far as it's when people ask me, I feel so overwhelmed. I want to get into opera, but it's so overwhelming. It is, in a way. I mean, there are very opinionated fans in opera. But I think that you just have to find a place where you can go hear it live. Yes, recordings are excellent. There's something special about hearing it live with people around you.
Definitely.
But I think that it's really necessary to read about the plot beforehand. I think that's really crucial. If you go in and you think, yes, there are super titles or subtitles or met titles, then you're going to understand it. It's going to be really difficult, I think, because some of the plots are a little convoluted or old-fashioned or about historical things that we don't necessarily emphasize in American schools. But that would be my advice. Go through and read about the plot, and ideally read a translation of the libretto in English and find out what are the famous tunes in it. That's a big thing too, because if you go to an opera and you don't know, it's just a lot, I think, to take in.
Yeah.
If you don't have any big tunes to wait for, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, you need those sort of marking points to know, oh, this is the big aria, or oh, this is the crazy scene, or oh, this is when they're gonna, trick the count or whatever. And
that does become problematic in operas that don't have plots. Like I just went to go see The Nose by Shostakovich. I really didn't know what was going on, and literally 3 characters throughout the show, in the opera, it was written in the opera that they come out and say, I don't know what's going on, this doesn't make any sense. I mean, and that I think that's a really specific case. But I mean, there are a lot of operas now, like my favorite Vossig or any of Schoenberg or Berg's operas. They don't really have arias that you can pick out.
Right.
But they do have moments.
Those were written for an audience that knew what came before. They knew the Mozart operas and the Verdi, and they understood the whole progression of it, so they could appreciate what was being done and what the changes were. But if you've never seen a Mozart opera, you're going to walk into a Philip Glass opera and think that opera sucks. But, if you don't have some context to hold on to, I think, as Jeremy pointed out, it's important to read what the story is first, because it's not as easy to glean the story from the opera itself. So I remember whenever I'd learn a new aria in school, I would go on Wikipedia and I would just read the synopsis on Wikipedia, and that's where you could find out the big numbers and who sings what and all of that stuff, because I didn't know that much about opera before I decided I wanted to be a classical singer. So there was a lot to learn. And Wikipedia and the internet, they have it. It's all up there. You just have to search.
A lot to learn. There's a lot to learn, and there's a steep learning curve, right? Like you're just like, whoa, like so much you have to learn about vocal technique and languages and style and all these composers and all these operas and this character and what type of voice type sings this role and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But for first opera goers, I think that finding the first opera is crucial. The right first opera, because my first opera was Camille Saint-Saëns, Samson and Delilah.
Oh my God, so was mine. That was my first opera.
But I didn't like it. I thought it was weird. I didn't connect with it at all. And at that point, I didn't like opera. But then I went to go see Carmen with my school, so it wasn't like a choice. I probably wouldn't have chosen to go see it. It was actually Carmen by the New York City Opera, which we'll discuss later. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And we had the nosebleed seats so you could see right into the pit, and I loved watching the bassoons. And I just fell in love with opera.
You guys went all the way from North Carolina to go to the Met?
No, we went to New York City Opera.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
But yeah, we went all the way.
I'm going to get so much crap for that. I apologize. New York City Opera.
And we took a train.
Wow.
It took all day.
That's a long trip.
No, I totally agree with you. The first opera is crucial. I remember not getting Samson and Delilah either. The first performance I saw was at Opera Memphis, and it was 2005, the fall of 2005. The mezzo who was Delilah had an amazing voice, and I remember being so impressed with, like, wow, like, she's not singing with a microphone. Like, this is what my voice teacher's always talking about. Like, this is what you work so hard to be able to do. The second time I saw Don Giovanni, and
yeah,
it's great, and everybody gets it. In on the joke.
I always recommend Don Giovanni or Carmen or something like that, or like a Mozart, but that not Così fan tutte or anything. But
I represent.
You hate Così fan tutte.
I do hate Così.
Say it.
I do.
I'm like the only person I know. Like so many opera people. They used to do this thing in opera news where they would ask people their least favorite operas, and so many people would say Così. I remember Stephanie Blythe said Così fan tutte, and I'm like, oh, I love you, Stephanie Blythe, but I love Così. I'm the only person I think who loves that opera.
Maggie and I saw Stephanie Blythe in Die Valkyrie, and they had that special at the Met, so they had that weird stage, and the stage, the movable stage was already, smaller than the regular stage because it sat on top of it, but Stephanie Blythe literally took up like half of the stage.
Yeah, she's a big lady. And hey, I mean, she's got a powerful voice, so...
She is an amazing mezzo-soprano.
I always think of Così, I always think about it's youthful. I think so many people get exasperated with the idea of youthful love, and I can kind of understand that. But I think what it is in Così, it's so chamber music-like. If you don't have, more than any of his other operas, I think, if you don't have singers who are really in tune with each other, it really kind of falls flat. But like the recording...
Very ensemble piece.
Yes.
And Maggie recently sang in the chorus of Così.
Yes, here in Boston as the North End Music and Performing Arts Center. It was great. That's all we need.
No, there's a recording with Schulte conducting, and it's Renee Fleming and Anne-Sophie von Otter and Olaf. It's a fantastic recording, and I think it's just because, first of all, those are all fantastic singers, but he just gets so much music out of it. I don't know. He doesn't let it just be silliness. And I think that the thing is, the really beautiful moments in Cozy have to actually be legit beautiful, and then the whole thing it becomes about this is about how people fall in and out of love, and there is something about that that's immortal.
I would disagree with what you guys were saying, that the first opera really matters, because I don't remember what my first opera was. I want to say Madame Butterfly, but my mom claims that she played the 7 VHS set of Wagner's Ring Cycle for me when I was little. She claims that I would watch it on the TV, and I don't know. I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. Like, I have no recollection.
You probably blocked it out. It's too young for Wagner.
Because my mom was, like, so excited about it. So, and then I became a singer. But, in any case, like, I don't remember. And I remember going to see Madame Butterfly and falling asleep because we were in the nosebleed section. And I just fell asleep. I was bored. And I saw Cecilia Bartoli in concert in L.A.
Oh, my God. I'm so
jealous. I'm jealous of you. Now I'm jealous.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
She dates anymore. Oh, you fell asleep, you said?
I fell asleep. I'm an asshole. I fell asleep. We were in the orchestra section. We were very close to her, and I was 17, and it was my boyfriend's birthday that day, but he came with us.
What was she performing?
She was doing her opera Proevita album.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of Haydn, I think.
Ugh.
But I don't know, because I fell asleep. I didn't pay attention. Anyways, more questions? Jeremy, what singer out there right now do you respect the most, other than Joyce DiDonato, because we already talked about how great she is, unless you want to talk more about her.
I can talk about a couple. The one I think just as far as the quality of their performances right now is maybe at the very highest level, in my opinion, that I've witnessed personally, is Sandra Radvanovsky. She has a level of artistry, I think, that harkens back to a different time of singing in the repertoire that she sings. Because now everyone always talks about there's a great dearth of singers for Verdi and Wagner, and she sings the crap out of those roles. And she really gets the style, and she sings as though she's not worrying about making every note be beautiful. She sings as though she's afraid of not expressing something. Like, every sound is so expressive. You just get so much, like, there's so much humanity or something in the way that she sings. There's so much truth. And the top is huge. The voice just, like, gleams just like the afternoon sun. I think, as far as quality of performances, I would put it the front of the pack. It comes to my mind. For a female singer, definitely.
What was her name again? I don't know her. I'm not familiar.
Sandra Radvanovsky. She's actually getting rave reviews right now for her run as Norma, the Metropolitan right now. And she's also doing Tosca. She's doing Tosca there later this season, but she's kind of become the go-to lady for the Italian war horses, which Lord knows we need those for opera right now.
Yeah.
That's great.
As far as respecting just like their entire body of work, I will always and forever defend Renee Fleming. I know some people don't agree with a lot of her choices, but Renee Fleming is actually why I got interested in wanting to be an opera singer. When I was a freshman at the University of Central Arkansas, I wanted to be a choral director because my greatest musical experiences up to that point have been in choral rehearsals and in choral and in all-state choir and things like that, as many people do.
As many singers start out in choir. It's just a natural progression, sure.
And I remember I had a friend, her name was Jennifer, and she was like, there's a soprano you should really listen to. Her name is Renee Fleming. Because we had actually gone to see a performance of Kirite Kanawa, and she came to Arkansas in Little Rock and sang one of her, she did a recital tour.
Awesome.
And she was sang beautifully, and I was asking her what other soprano she liked, because this was a few weeks after me starting my freshman year. University of Central Arkansas, and she was saying, you should really listen to this woman, Renee Fleming. And I didn't get around to it for a long time. She played a clip of her for me in her car, and I remember thinking, oh, that's nice. But later that summer, I got her CD, just the self-titled album, Renee Fleming, and I also got The Beautiful Voice. And I bought her book. I think her book is one of the most inspiring books I've ever read.
I read her book. I read her book the fall of my freshman year at Smith. Yeah, I found it in the library. And
oh my God,
just,
singers!
Page to page. I know we're dorks, but shut up.
It's something about the way she wasn't talking about just where she debuted and where she did this and how amazing this was. She was so willing to talk about, man, when I started out, I couldn't sing above the staff. And I remember standing in the practice room with lemon drops on my tongue, trying to keep my tongue up so I could learn how to sing high. And I did sit-ups to try and learn how to breathe. And how she was a singer who, it didn't come naturally to her. She had to work very, very hard for her technique. And she said she sort of found her artistic voice through her education. And she had much education. There's a whole other debate about whether or not operatic training is overly academic now. But she is a fine product of the conservatory system. And she went to Crane School of Music, studied with Pat Mislin. She went to Eastman, and then she went to, at the time, what was called the American Opera Center, which was now, I think, the Juilliard Opera Center, and where she studied with Beverly Johnson. And she said, for a year, she was a Fulbright scholar. So she was a student for a long, long time. And for a soprano in her fa, normally people get going about their mid-20s, are really going. But she didn't get going until her early 30s. And I thought I
didn't realize that,
I thought there was something really interesting about her. And in that, the fact that she had to bide her time and the fact that she had so many disappointments in the beginning. And it sort of emerged as such an important operatic figure now. And again, I've met her. She's extremely, extremely kind, extremely generous woman.
That's great.
Yeah, we have tickets to go see her in supposedly her last performance of Rusalka this spring. Lee and I do.
Yeah. I hope they put that on DVD too.
Oh, they definitely will.
They will in 5 years. I have to say my favorite opera singer right now is René Pape.
Fantastic singer.
I love him. He has such a unique timbre for a baritone, and he is so nice. I've met him. I've spoken to him once. I've seen him a lot because I used to work at the Met, and we would go to the Met Cafe for lunch, and he would just be hanging out by himself, which is really sad. I think he was lonely.
Well, I think it's a very lonely life for a lot of international opera singers because you're traveling by yourself a lot. That happens.
Yeah. But, he's very committed to his fans, and he's just a fabulous, fabulous singer.
That's great.
So, I love him.
I hope they hear these things, these wonderful things that we say about them someday. That'd be nice, right? Last question, Jeremy. What do you think the future holds for opera? What do you envision happening? Maybe specifically American opera, but all kinds of opera.
And this is sort of in response to the City Opera's death.
I follow the sort of, the several years of dying and rebirth of the New York City Opera as closely as some other people will. But I will say that I think it's just very much a myth that opera is dying, even in the States where it doesn't have as many subsidies as it does in other places. What I would hope the future of opera would be where we could combine some of the elements that make opera just historically such an important art form and such a unique art form, namely the return of emphasis on creating acoustically exciting voices and truthful performances, not necessarily cinematic performances. There was a discussion on Parterre about this, actually, about whether or not now it's useful to try and sort of emphasize people being very attractive, et cetera, et cetera. And I was saying that I don't have anything against an opera singer being very attractive as long as they are tapping into the stuff that makes this art form what it is, which is beautiful singing, beautiful phrasing. I think that having a great conductor and a great orchestra and a great stage director is important too. I think that the fundamental element of opera that makes it really unique, I think, is the singing. So in the future, I would hope that we could combine the elements like that are really prevalent now with the ubiquitousness of ubiquity of HD broadcasts in the Metropolitan Opera.
Yeah, I feel like Don Pasquale, 2 seasons ago, is probably like the best example of that, where it was Anna Netrebko, Marius Kavician, and
Matthew Polenzani. John Del Carlo, right?
Yeah, John Del Carlo. But I'm emphasizing the beautiful people.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
cast.
I love the performance.
Beautiful.
They were very energetic. They all connect very well. And I think at least Anna Netrebko and Marius Kavician are friends in real life. And but they could have gotten
it's a sexy plot,
right,
so
because sex sells, and that's
Yeah.
And that's what I think Peter Gelb is really pushing at today. And I think that in some ways it's working. Because, I don't know, you get more pulled into it at first than you believe that this beautiful young woman is actually playing a beautiful young woman. You don't have to imagine.
Yeah, and I have a really interesting... I'm very awesome, so I think everything I say is interesting. No, I had something to add about that. I struggle with this a lot as a singer with the weight, the weight issue, and I think everyone struggles with that. And Jeremy, maybe you have something to add about this, but I do believe that in today's culture, if opera wants to compete with other pastimes like the movies or pop music or things like that, if it wants to sort of, widen its audience, it needs to draw an audience in, and sexy does that. Anna Netrebko is very sexy, and it works. Now, does that mean... Oh, go ahead.
I'm going to have to disagree pretty hard. I'm going to tell you,
hard.
I think that it is fine if somebody is very, very physically attractive and sings very well. But what I believe at the end of the day, what draws people to opera is the music. And I know many people who say that Pavarotti was alive now, he wouldn't have had that career. I say, bull crap. If you listen to the way Pavarotti sang Nessun Dorma or Gelida Menina or any number of those fantastic recordings that he made before he sort of turned into, the silly Italian man who carried the handkerchief at the end of his career, he was singing very beautifully. Is an absolute star. Because what draws people to music is singing. Now, if you're sexy and you sing your face off, that's fine. There have always been singers like that, like Maria Callas, after she was a very, very beautiful, beautiful woman, and Leontine Price was a beautiful, beautiful woman. But you need to be beautiful and you need to sing well. You need to sing exceptionally well. And if you're not beautiful and you sing well, I still think that the priority should be on you. And I don't think that we'll have a future if people believe that in a way that you can sort of dumb down the art form by making it sort of like a beefcake parade. And I know that that's not what people's intentions are when they say that we need, more attractive people in opera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that you have to sell opera as it is if you want opera to have a future. Because the person who's going to the opera house to see Anna Netrebko because she's pretty is probably not the person who's going to be a really invested fan in the art form. And
yeah, but so then what do you think of Deborah Voigt's gastric bypass surgery?
Yeah, that was several years ago, and I definitely think that she acknowledges that there is the difference in the vocal quality since she lost the weight. What I would say is if Deborah Voigt was going to be in a production of Ariadne Obnoxus, and she was going to be singing Ariadne, and she couldn't wear a little dress, then, the production should have been changed. Deborah Voigt, she's still considered one of the greatest, one of the best Wagnerian singers of the world. But at the time, she absolutely was probably the preeminent Strauss soprano on the planet. And if the stage director decided that she couldn't fit into a dress, and she therefore wasn't going to be in the show anymore, I think that kind of shows a really narrow view of what the whole art form is about. You're supposed to work with the individuals that you have in front of you.
My point of view is a little inspired by Kate Lindsay. I don't know if you've seen her in Hansel and Gretel or anything, but she is hot. I mean, and she does hot yoga, and that's something that she loves, and it works for her, and she's very tiny, and I'm sure there are drawbacks for that as an opera singer, but for her, she's making it work. And Stephanie Blythe is very large, but that doesn't mean that she's not beautiful and that she can't be sexy. I saw her as Orfeo, and she was hot. I mean, she looked good. So I'm not saying that everyone should be tiny and sexy like Hollywood says to be sexy. I'm saying everyone should find their own way to be on fire, be sexy, be attractive.
You have to feel like you're
hot.
Yeah, you have to feel like you're putting forth your best version of yourself.
Exactly.
I think that's something, of course, that any performer wants to feel like. But I don't. I think when people start talking about competing with pop music and things like that, I feel that that's not really what opera is about. I don't mean to in any way denigrate any other art form. I just think it takes a little bit of work to get into opera.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think that if you do the work and you get into it and you realize what it's really about, then I think that things like so-and-so is a little big to be Carmen, I think will very quickly fall by the wayside when you get to prioritizing things like the beauty of the voice and the dramatic truthfulness. And there was one of the examples I used on this article that I was commenting on about a particular baritone who looks like a model, and he looks like he could be in films now.
Yes.
Was the comparison between Cavarrodosi's aria in a prison cell, E luce van l'estelle, the stars shining, and blah, 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 blah. So I played his, I put a video of his, and I put a video of Pavarotti's. Now, Jonas Kaufmann looks like an actor, very attractive, and very, very...
He's gorgeous.
Yeah, he's gorgeous, honey.
He speaks, I think French. He is German, so he speaks English, and I think he speaks Italian too. Very smart, very good musician. And then you have Pavarotti, who couldn't necessarily read music terribly well, but in the performances of that aria, even though Pavarotti was at that point was bigger, he was just more compelling in the art form that he was being compared to Kaufman in. Because to me, opera is not cinema; it's a different thing.
Yeah.
And if you're judging it on the singing and how Pavarotti was able to communicate what he was saying better than Jonas Kaufmann because he had a better command of his instrument, even if he was not as physically dramatic. He was more vocally dramatic, and because of that, in the theater, I think you would get more of the truth of what he was saying and the truth that was in the music.
Unfortunately, we should wrap this up. I just had one last question. I'm very proud of this question, and I plan to make it a regular question on this podcast. Jeremy, what do you listen to on your iPod? Or what do you when you're walking around France or wherever you are? I like to listen to Macklemore right now. I've bought his album on iTunes, and I love it. What do you like to listen to for fun?
And I know that I'm going to sound like the world's biggest nerd for this, but I really do listen to a lot of opera. I really do. I've been listening a lot to Renee Fleming's new CD, The Guilty Pleasures. She has a fantastic voice. I've been listening to the Au Fidile, a song by Dupart, as I walk around in France and just feel very French as I listen to her sing French.
Wonderful.
You should break out the Debussy string quartet.
Yeah, you should probably get a mime to follow you around and do an interpretive thing with that. That'd be great.
No, but I guess as far as not operatic, I do really like Queen. I really like Michael Jackson. I like Whitney Houston. Her earlier stuff is incredible. Mariah Carey, those types of
great singers.
Mariah Carey holds the record, the Guinness record for the biggest vocal range.
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise me.
That girl can sing notes only dogs can hear. I mean, it's amazing.
That surprised me. I thought it would be like a guy, because guys can have their bass range and then they can go up to their falsetto range. But
Jillian,
nope,
you're not
Mariah Carey.
This, but I'm going to tell you that bass notes aren't everything.
Whatever.
For those of you who don't know out there, Jillian has a tattoo of a bass clef in a location that I will not disclose.
It's on my hip. It's not like on my butt or anything.
It's on her hip. Okay, I just closed it. Jeremy, was there anything else you wanted to add to this? Anything you wanted to say?
I guess, one thing I spend a lot of time thinking about in terms of the future of opera and things like that is the way that singers are trained these days. I think this is a critical issue that needs to be addressed and thought about very hard by people who are in important positions in the operatic community. Once upon a time, you could take voice lessons with someone, and then you could go sing for someone, and then you could get a job. Now, that's very simplistic. It's very simplistic, obviously. You used to be able to, you had a nice voice, you sang for, Madame so-and-so, who sang for 40 years at La Scala, and then she had you sing for someone, and then you sang well, then you got an engagement. And then from there, that first engagement, you were sort of able to develop in, I think, a way that enabled people to become very interesting artists. Christy Ludwig studied with her mother. She sang actually for a couple of years in the rehearsal room of an opera house. It was sort of converted into like a makeshift performance space. But she talks about how she was able to crack high notes and try out all sorts of crazy roles in her early 20s, like Amneris, and things that people would say are insane now. But it was a safe environment. It wasn't going to be on YouTube in 2 seconds if she made a bad choice. And she was able to develop into one of the greatest mezzos of all time.
Well, it's interesting that you point that out, though. I just want to throw in there that YouTube doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's that there are a lot of haters out there. They're going to put up their critical thoughts.
I think that too much now, the stepping stone, at least in the States, the stepping stones to a career are so locked into academia that it really excludes a lot of exceptional talent. Like, at the Metropolitan Opera auditions in 2012, there's a baritone named Clark Evans. He had been, he studied voice for a few years in Kentucky, and then, left school and got married and was working on cars for several years, hadn't had his lessons in years, and showed up at his friend basically told him, you need to go, you have a voice, you should go audition, and sang the prologue from Pagliacci. No. And he said, he has a big, very baritone voice like you don't hear anymore, and he, fortunately, made it all the way to the end and won. And I wonder how many voices like that are excluded by simple virtue of the fact that if they audition for a young artist program, they get turned away because they didn't study with so-and-so or didn't go to such and such conservatory. I think that the conservatory system now is so self-contained, and there are a lot of flaws with that anyway.
And I actually think that's the whole idea of music education from elementary school to the conservatories would be something maybe we could have you talk about on a different podcast.
Yeah, we need to have you back, Jeremy. Obviously, you have a lot to say, and this has been really wonderful. I mean, I'd just like to say that right now.
Thank
You're welcome.
I guess I've spent a lot of time reading about these issues, and having just come from not too long ago from the conservatory system, I have lots of opinions about things that some things are okay, and some things just need to be fixed. Like the price of schools, I think eliminates a lot of people from the game too.
Oh, the price of opera, the price of tickets, all of that. So we're definitely going to have you back, I would say. I don't know about Jillian, but I think we should wrap this up, though. I don't know about you guys, but I gotta go. And Jeremy, I don't even know what time it is in France right now. What time is it in France right now?
Almost 10 o'clock. It's almost 10.
It's almost 10 o'clock. It's in the wee hours, or perhaps you're getting ready to go out. I don't know. Is there much of a party scene where you are? Do you go out clubbing and such?
You go to the discotheque.
The discotheque?
There are some bars that stay open very late here. Like I was like,
nice.
They stay open until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh shit.
Oh, well then you've got a good, what is that? A good like 7 more hours to drink. So go get on that.
So thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.
Good luck in France.
Great. Thanks for having me on. I love it.
Have fun. Eat a baguette or a croissant for me.
Absolutely.
A croissant.
And you might not smoke, but pretend you're smoking and looking critical like the French do. I think that's something they do. I don't know. Over your croissant.
I'll do it. I'll send a condescending look and happy lunch on a croissant in a way.
Yeah.
So. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.